23rd episode of CloudFocus Weekly for the second week of December 2010. This episode is titled Sleep on It. CloudFocus Weekly is sponsored by Arkus, cloud computing experts. I'm your host, Jason Howard, and joining me is the co-host, for once, for all, and for 23 times, Justin Elstein. Justin, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing all right. Usually I get the title, Sleep on It. I don't get.
Dreamforce. I was thinking about you should sleep on the things that you learned at Dreamforce.
Oh.
So sleep on it.
Gotcha.
And we slept on it, and now we have some opinions. So good segue into our agenda. So we have a couple things. One, you have a blog post about Dreamforce. Funny enough, it seems like a good topic at the time.
It was a reaction piece.
We're going to talk about that. Talk about Dreamforce, the wrap-up, sort of now that we've had some time, now that we've listened to Own It 400 times on our phone, which I had this morning coming in. And then also have a little Google Wave news. There's some happenings in the Google Wave world. And then we'll talk about the 2010 Times Person of the Year. We'll announce that.
Breaking news.
Because no one else will have seen it before.
Breaking news.
It is breaking because I actually didn't know. And then we'll make our app picks of the week, but we're going to make them the Dreamforce app picks of the week. So they can be something you've picked before, but maybe you learn more about at Dreamforce and you thought was exciting. So you can pick that again. Maybe new announcements.
Cool.
So let's get to it. So lead us in by talking about your podcast and what do you say? You said there was too many clouds?
I'll talk about my blog post. You can talk about your podcast. I wrote a post, a reaction statement titled Why So Many Clouds, which is essentially to say I thought the keynotes and the big announcements, the big reveals at this Dreamforce 2010 Collaborate were a little fuzzy and didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I mean, they make a lot of sense from a technological standpoint. Like, I get the technology, I understand what they're doing, but as far as the messaging perspective and the way that they presented these big announcements did not make a whole lot of sense to me.
So breakdown, so we kind of covered this at Dreamforce, at Cloud9, over in the corner where we were doing a live but recorded podcast. But talk about the big announcements, and what happened is they took these big announcements and they kind of created them into new clouds, which I guess in our minds were sort of reserved for, I don't know, I guess bigger things than they are now.
Right. So at the first big reveal was database.com, which ended up getting its own cloud at the top of the past pyramid, as I called it in the blog post. So database.com, its own cloud, essentially Salesforce, taking the force.com platform and breaking it apart even further to say, okay, now the database layer is not connected to the logic layer. So it's taking what used to be sort of in one layer of chiclets or rows in their chart and breaking it into two layers. Okay, fine. Database.com makes a lot of sense. You can have a database in the cloud and then do stuff with the data in the database.
So in essence, you can do the same stuff you could have done, although I think more, than you could do in the force.com platform. Build objects, relate them, parent-child relationships, roll up stuff, but it's more of a true database. So I asked some questions at the demo booth.
It seemed that way.
Well, I asked some questions at the demo booth. I wanted to get some more information. And like most things, I couldn't get deep enough in to satisfy my needs. I mean, I'm someone who, while I play a technical person, I've built databases literally from the command line. So I do have some understanding of how that's done and tables and primary keys and relationships. And so when I went up, I was like, what, tell me, is this new? Did you guys buy something and not tell us? Is this actually the Force.com platform? Is it the same database structure that you're using for Force.com? And what I understood was, in the vagueness that they gave it to me, this is based on the Force.com platform technologies. So it is not net new. They didn't go build something net new. They just, as you're saying, abstracted the layer that is Force.com, the login, all that, said let's just make it open to APIs and create a new sort of way of, a quick way of building a database. But you don't get you don't get page layouts. You don't get, fields and enters and all that. You'd have to do that all through the API.
And the reason why you don't get those things is because the database is now more open to other technologies, which they put in another cloud, the Heroku cloud, which to me did not make a whole lot of sense. So Heroku is a platform, a product that allows you to write Ruby code in the cloud.
Ruby on Rails.
Ruby on Rails, although they left out the on Rails part. They just called it Ruby.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
So just to back up, I've been doing some studying up on Ruby. Ruby is a programming language. Ruby on Rails is a web application or an application development environment, that you can build applications kind of like you could with Perl to PHP. PHP was the environment you'd build things in. So Heroku is a hosting service that you could host Ruby on Rails applications.
Right.
Okay.
So Heroku got its own cloud. Salesforce made it known in public that they have all intentions of purchasing the Heroku product from the Heroku team and inviting them in as a family, as was made extremely evident.
Abundantly clear.
Heroku's a family. Let's not mess with Heroku.
They're coming over for Christmas.
I think they run a country or something. They're the family. Don't mess with them. And they were purchased by Salesforce and given their own cloud. Now, to me, that muddied the waters a bit because, Ruby, why is Heroku its own cloud, but VMforce not its own cloud? Right? Isn't VMforce just the ability to write Java and run it in the cloud on a virtual server hosted by VMware? Like, isn't that literally the same exact thing? But why is Heroku in its own cloud and VMforce not in its own cloud? And Ruby gets a chiclet in the line items, just like VMforce does, but it also gets its own cloud. So it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me from a branding and marketing perspective. It also put a lot of emphasis on something that I didn't think really necessarily needed emphasizing, and it probably made it a bit unclear to people. Well, okay, now I have this platform. I can write code in Apex. I can write Java. I can write Ruby. When do I write what? What should I do and when? It makes it a little harder to see. I always thought it was very simple to go to the Force.com platform and say, okay, I need to do this. This is how I do it. Now it's like, well, you can do it this way or that way or that way or that way. And it's starting to sound a little bit like IBM, where you can do it this way or this way or this way or this way or this way. And it just...
Should have titled this the Gauntlet, because you're throwing down the proverbial gauntlet.
It needs to be said. So, when Salesforce does great, we give them props up the wazoo.
True.
When, in my opinion, they don't do something so great, I'm going to let it known. I'm going to try and be objective about it, and this is the way I feel about what they did with Heroku. But that's not even the worst offender.
I totally agree. Those two, while they were interesting parts to the Force.com platform, and you can kind of see them, those two you could maybe make arguments for. You could say, well, Chatter, I even would go back and say, I don't think Chatter should get to... Chatter is not even something that exists by itself.
Well, it will.
It will in Chatter free, but it's still on the Salesforce platform. So,
right, but Chatter.com, coming in, February, Safe Harbor applies, will be a standalone product. Its own thing. You don't have to be a Salesforce.com user. You're literally just using Chatter. And for that purposes, I can make the argument that it belongs in its own cloud.
True. It got its own cloud way before it was even its own thing, right? It got its own thing when people was in beta. It got its own cloud. So I think let's go on to the last one, and then I'll give you my
the last one, which I think is the big offender, is essentially a product by BMC Software, an extremely large software company for IT issue tracking called Remedy Force. And they put essentially a product called Remedy. They put it in its own cloud and said, here it is, it's Remedy Force. So it's essentially a product that really was built on the Force.com platform that belongs in the App Exchange. And it makes no sense for me to have things coming out for partners, for people to write their own apps for ISVs. ISV Force, we're supporting you. You write your own apps on the platform. You sell them through the App Exchange, the app marketplace. or we just buy you and put you in your own cloud. I mean, whatever.
I think more for the two things that strike me funny about it. One is the use of the Force name, right? Because we've been told as ISVs and we've been told by ISVs and VARs and whatever that using the Force name in our company name is no good, and using it in our application names is no good.
And even the branding with the clouds.
Right. You
not, can't. That's our cloud.
That
you
is
cannot
their
use
cloud.
that cloud.
I understand that. That's rights and digital rights and, protection of trademarks. Great. So, funny that it's Remedyforce, although I guess that's why it can be Remedyforce, because it's part of Salesforce.
Part of the cloud.
I think there's a bigger connection between the two. But here's what I'm going to give the overall, and maybe this is me, coming up with an excuse. I agree that it is strange. I agree that those three clouds seem odd. Again, I even go back to Chatter as its own cloud. Seems odd to me. I get it that it's going to be chatter.com and blah, blah, blah. I really think that there's a differentiator between technology and infrastructure and platform, and then marketing message. Those things are off to the side. And then there's what we want to show at Dreamforce. And that has everything to do with everything. And the rest of it is, because we know the stories, that content, which was announced free last Dreamforce, was not told to the people who own content until the day before.
Meaning the product managers.
The product managers didn't know that it was going to be free the day before.
Until he announced it.
Yeah, some learned 24 hours in advance, some learned literally
as the words were coming out of his mouth.
So, while I love some of the... And I think this is what you get from a company that we both, we say they do great things in terms of them using different... Like using the Chatterlytics or using stuff like Chatter Bingo. They will adapt very quickly and free moving, and in that way they're going to do things that just don't make sense because they haven't really thought them through, right? They didn't think, when they built the Dreamforce portal, they didn't think about Chatter Bingo. They launched it 2 days before or a day before Dreamforce because someone built it because it was cool, because everybody called out for it. That's them being agile, if you will. I think their marketing, which generally is pretty well thought out, right? Marketing should be something that's pretty well thought out, marketing message, all of that, I think suffers from the same thing, which is that if someone in the product areas wants to do something, or if Benioff wants to make something known and a bigger splash, we'll give it its own cloud. And who cares if the marketing message is off? And who cares if people look at all these clouds and get confused? And who cares if there's 40,000 chiclets that you can't even read unless it's on a 300 by 100 HD screen at the Moscone Center?
Which is awesome, by the way.
Awesome screen. Who cares about all that? The end of the day is they want to make a splash. I say if you want to get in the business, get into the cloud consolidation business, because some of those clouds are coming back together. You just know that two of them are going to fall into the other one, and that one's going to fall into that one, because you're right, almost four of them are the same thing, and they don't have enough differentiator. I think it's just a way to highlight them now, and we'll see them all come back. Because again, it's not scalable. We're talking about scalable architecture. It's not scalable to have a set of clouds that go across the screen forever and ever, right? 10, 15, 20, 30 clouds. What's that going to mean to a marketing message? So they'll bring them together, and then my guess is they'll bring them together, and then boop, another one will pop up next year, and then boop, another one will pop up the year after. And that's just sort of the way it'll go. And we'll sit at the podcast on episode 420 being like, remember when Remedyforce had its own cloud?
You smoke a couple of cigars since
I will be doing some hard drinking at that point. So
anyway, that's a recap of the blog post that was written by yours truly. You could go to blog.arkusinc.com and read it for yourself. There's a little bit more detail in there, and leave a comment or two on Twitter and let us know what you think.
I think a lot of people have already retweeted and said absolutely.
Oh, by the way, the greatest honor in the world, this was retweeted by the one, the only Daryl Shaber. So
that is
it was a good blog post when Daryl Shaber
and he agreed.
retweeted.
He agreed in the tweet.
Daryl Shaber doesn't agree with anything. He just retweets things.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about. I guess that's our Dreamforce wrap up. Is there anything else you want to pull from Dreamforce?
I mean, that came off a little negative. I did really enjoy Dreamforce.
Yep.
I had a great time. Learned a bunch about the platform. Met a lot of people, particularly people that I had pre-met on the Dreamforce application. So it was nice to actually, shake a hand and say, "Hi, I'm Justin. I recognize your face." See some people that I haven't seen in a year or two, which is also very good. I really enjoyed the Stevie Wonder concert. It was really, really great. I will say the Bill Clinton speech, not as good as Colin Powell or Malcolm Gladwell, Dr. Larry Brilliant. I
totally agreed.
I really had, maybe my expectations were a little too high for Bill Clinton, but it just wasn't as good as in the past, what that third keynote. And maybe it was, again, my expectations. Maybe it was the weather causing him to be 45 minutes late and having Stevie Wonder ramble on for 50 minutes. That really sort of
it also
brought my energy level down a little bit.
It was a different vibe. Stevie Wonder up there, rambling, but kind of just talking about his life and his family and his beliefs and his mother, and that was sort of very personal. And then what I felt was that Clinton got up, and again, politics aside, and this is not a political podcast. We can do that in Cloud Politician Weekly, but really, it just felt too stump speech to me. It didn't feel enough about the subject matter. Colin Powell was very much about education last year. Gladwell was very much about helping the world. Clinton has a lot to say about that. I thought he could have tailored his speech towards what he's doing in his foundation. The big thing I think should have been brought up and splashed across the screen, again, no slides, kind of odd, was he's raised $63 billion. I think that was the number, $63 billion for his foundation, the Clinton Worldwide Foundation or Clinton something Foundation, which is stunning. $63 billion in a foundation. I think I don't know in terms of all foundations, but I know he's gotten some of the big hitters in the world to give him billions of dollars. That's a great thing to talk about. What happened in the last election? I'm not at Dreamforce to hear about what happened in the last election, really. I know what happened. And whether I agree with it or not, it's not my thing.
Well, this Dreamforce did have a couple of different things, right? They had the Unusual Thinkers track, which is a different type of track for sessions at a Dreamforce. More TED-like, the TED Talks or TED Conference. And then Bill Clinton, again, sort of talking about things that he never really related it back to Salesforce, which I thought other speakers in the past, the special keynote speakers, have done a really good job of doing,
right.
Bringing it back to mobility and scalability and new technologies and this and that.
Empowerment and giving back. The comments he made towards the audience a lot of times were, you guys know because you guys are all doing great because you're here. I kept thinking, oh, well, yeah, but, how about a little bit of, but you guys all did. He didn't even mention maybe he did, I missed it, but didn't even mention the great thing I thought, and I'll bring it back to something great, bringing the helping the foundation work into the conference.
The volunteer work.
Was brilliant.
Yep.
Was brilliant. I went, and I actually went by myself and then met up with two other customers, and we just sat there filling bags of food and doing it for like 45 minutes. We were having a conversation about Dreamforce, and of course, and that was their first Dreamforce, and it was fun, and I'm a partner, and blah, blah, blah. But I just thought, this is great, because they said, I heard the numbers were like 70,000 bags filled, something.
I think it was even more than that.
I'm sure towards the end.
I think it was like 150,000 some odd bags of food.
Next year, I think they should put a banner or something and show us and kind of make it a big splashy thing. But what a great thing to allow people who, for the most part, are doing pretty well. It's pretty expensive to go out to San Francisco. It's pretty expensive to own Salesforce licenses. It's pretty expensive to run businesses, whatever. But then to take an hour of this sort of time that you're sort of geeking out or doing tech talks or sitting in bean bags and playing on your $1,000 laptop, and then take that time and say, I'm going to go help someone else, and then to get the power of 15 to 20,000 people to do that. I thought that was awesome. So that was a highlight for me of Dreamforce. The music, I've literally created a Dreamforce playlist now, Dreamforce 10 playlist, because some of the music, again, seemed to hit so perfectly with the message that it was brilliant. So those are good stuff. I think that was our Dreamforce wrap-up. And we'll see you there next year. It's in August next year, end of August. So not a lot of time, really, if you're getting ready. We'll think of something fun to do as well. For all those who are waiting for your T-shirts, remember we said that if you went to the T-shirt contest and if you didn't get it, didn't meet up with us, we did 2 or 3 meetups, we will send you one, but you still have to do all the things. But you just have to email me, and that's in the Dreamforce portal, in the group. Email me, and I will send you out one because we're just that nice guys, I guess. So let's move on to a little news, because we cannot have any one podcast. This could be our running joke and/or theme, could be our rat hole. But Google has announced two things about Google Wave. One is they're continuing support into 2011.
Yes, I noticed when I logged in that the navigation bar changed a little bit, and at the very top it says Google Wave will remain in service into 2011 with a little link to learn more.
And the Learn More talks about what I think is probably the best news to come out. They talk about Google in a box, or Google Wave in a box, Wave in a box. Open source projects are awesome. I belong to a couple. I've funded lots of them. I really believe in them. But you have to get a critical mass. If you don't get a critical mass, they will die on the vine. And a lot of open source projects, millions, have gone away. So to take Google Wave and say, it's open source and you can go do with it. If it's not funded correctly, if it's not, there's not set up correctly, there's one company out there, or company foundation, that knows how to do open source projects and does them better than anybody else. It's their thing. They've been doing it probably one of the longest, and that's Apache. And so that Apache has actually accepted Google Wave, and it's now going to be called Apache Wave, and that it's going to be set to work within the Apache the Apache server is phenomenal news. Apache server is one of the most known, well-liked, not even easy to install, supported web servers in the world. We run off of it. It's actually a front to Pwn. And to have Apache and their power behind it is just phenomenal. So for all you Google Wave people, and we know you have to mention Google Wave every time, that is great news. More to come. Again, as soon as I get my hands on anything to play with, there's some things you can start with, but it's very, very rough right now. I will start to play with it, and I'll let you know. Maybe we'll be one of the first people to build our own wave to ourselves. I don't know how that goes. And then wrapping it up, the last piece of news, something you just put on our agenda in Google Wave, which
threw it on there. Facebook founder and CEO Mark Zuckerberg is Time Magazine's Person of the Year for 2010.
That's actually pretty good. I went back. I don't know. I sent the link to you and our other partner about
who shall remain nameless
for his own protection. He's wanted in 3 states. About the 60 Minutes interview with Mark Zuckerberg. And I didn't see it on 60 Minutes. I saw, actually, they mentioned Dreamforce. He mentioned, and that's when I wrote it down. I'm like, I gotta go see that. Ubiquitous capture, blah, blah, blah. So I go, and it was up early. I went online, and I started watching it. They cut it into parts. And they actually did some sort of before and after, what he was like a year ago. Then they did all these breakout sections that they didn't do in 60 Minutes. He is fascinating. To me, he's fascinating, not only because of his age, not only because of what he's done, but some of the things he hasn't done. The one thing that they asked him and said, well, what's the one thing you haven't done that you now know you were correct on? And he said, selling. He said, Yahoo is going to buy us for 1-point-something billion. Everybody thought we should sell. Why would you not? That's your big goal, is to either sell or go IPO. And he said, that's not our goal. Our goal isn't just to get to the point to sell or to IPO. Our goal is to create something great. And to create, we're not going to check the list IPO. And now his company's worth 6 or 7 times more than that. He's literally created something that, not that can't be stopped, but is so powerful that the likes of Microsoft and Google are shaking in their boots about how to keep up in it.
So to bring some statistics, because we love statistics, into how powerful it is, Facebook has literally wired together 1/12 of humanity into a single network. So 1/12 of, I guess, all humans are registered users of Facebook. If it was a country, it would be the 3rd largest country in the world, just below China and India. So that is some pretty impressive stuff as far as getting people connected into one, albeit not so closed, but closed network of interactions is pretty impressive in just 7 years.
And 2 things I think one stat that he rattled off is one of the post interviews talking about mobile, and they said, are you going to sell a mobile phone that's a Facebook phone? And they said no. Now maybe they are, but they said no, we will build apps for all of mobile phones. He said out of the 500 million people, 200 million access it through mobile.
I only really access Facebook through my mobile phone. I very rarely go to facebook.com.
But you think about that. Mobile access at whatever that number is, 32% or whatever the quick math is, if you could say to anybody, if your application was accessed by that much of a large population, 200 million people access it through mobile, that's just stunning. The other one was, are people were asking, I guess Google or others, are you worried that Facebook is going to create their own economy, right? What happens if they get into Facebook Bucks or Facebook Cash or Facebook something that they can then start to control, right, all the monetary side of Facebook, which again, they've done great at monetizing something that really, it doesn't feel like they've monetized it. I'm a user, I see the ads, unlike Google where you've seen, I think the Google ads have gone more and more, they're more on the top, more on the side, more on my Gmail, more on my phone, there are a lot more. It'll be interesting to see how they monetize it in the future and what they do with it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that certainly holds true about Facebook is something that, just to bring it back to Dreamforce for a second, that Mark Benioff always says is in the technology industry, you're always overestimating what you can do in 1 year and always underestimating what you can do in 10. And this is a good example of underestimating what you can do in 10 years, because in 7 years to have over 500 million users registered for a service and 200 million accessing through mobile devices, who would have thought?
Yeah.
Right. So
anybody would love those numbers. And I think that really impressive also is just that they have done it with, again, not one TV commercial ever. They're not a company that,
they don't have their own, but they are like all over.
Well,
TV
they don't need to be. They
right.
are. That's the sort of thing is that everybody's adopted them as the go-to, them and Twitter. And Twitter's sort of, right in there, but as the go-to standard for, there's no television show, there's no ad for anything, there's no anything that people don't just point you to. And this is what they're bringing up in the 60 Minutes interview, which everybody should go watch, is that, are you concerned if you're Google that people used to search for, if I want to see a Toyota Prius, right, I go to Google and I search for Toyota Prius. Well, if you're Google now, if you're, Facebook says, don't go to Google, go to Facebook and type in Toyota Prius and find the Toyota Prius page, and then see your 5 friends who have bought a Toyota Prius and see what they've said about it. Because who knows more about you, and who can you trust more than your friends? It takes the Amazon model of making reviews, but makes it personal. Could they go to TV, where I'm watching a TV show and it says, Justin, I'm watching Breaking Bad, and he goes, Justin Elsing likes this show.
I do like that show.
In real time as I'm watching it, maybe then goes, Justin Elsing's watching this show, and we're watching it together.
I likely would be watching that show.
So there you go.
If it was on.
So some really cool stuff. I can't wait to see if they do.
By the way, they got
future.
snubbed for a Golden Globe, but that's another podcast.
That's not a podcast I'm doing. So let's go. App pick of the week, the CloudFocus app pick of the week. This week's is going to be the Dreamforce edition, and then we promise not to be Dreamforced out. So this is it. Next week we'll go back to our normal cloudy ways. But we're going to pick things that we saw in Dreamforce that we, apps or things that we liked, and highlight them here. So you go first.
So are the rules that I can pick just one, or can I pick more than one?
Well, favorite is one.
Favorite, I really liked...
You can do a runner-up.
I really liked the Box.net booth. I may have picked them before as a pick of the week, but I really liked what I saw at the Box.net booth. Both the Box.net product for enterprise...
so tell us what it is.
Yeah, I'm getting there. For enterprise content management. So the ability to store and access documents in the cloud. So PowerPoint presentations, Word docs, Excel docs, video files, audio files, you name it, they can store it. And they have some really good content management features that you would want to see in a enterprise class content manager, like versioning, check-in, check-out, local folder sync. So you can, have a folder on your desktop that is, you can access the content that's up in Box.net. You can then open it, edit it right there. It's checked out, save it back, and it saves back up into Box.net. And they have a really nice integration with Salesforce on multiple fronts. One is sort of a simple one where it's just a tab. So the Box.net tab, you click on the tab, and there's Box.net. Great, that's not too impressive. The more impressive part is that every record within Salesforce, so maybe a lead, can have a folder in Box.net that people can have access to or not. and then a little embedded widget on the lead record that has the documents that are within that folder, which is pretty hot. You know, when you're looking at a lead or an opportunity inside of Salesforce, and you have a little widget that sits on top of the record on the page, and it's syncing back and forth with that records folder up in box.net that has permissions around it, and have the documents, the proposal, the pitch deck, the this, the that. A very good competitor to Salesforce's own content product. It has a lot more features than content has, and it has the integration as well. I was really impressed with box.net's offering. So that was my product that I really liked on the expo floor. I also really liked Siteforce, looking at the demonstration of the new Salesforce Sites technology that's being rolled out with
very excited about this.
With drag and drop editing, inline WYSIWYG editor for text areas, widgets, components, what they're calling a CMS. Not sure if it's really a CMS or not. We'll see once it matures a little bit. But what they mean by that is, you have pre-built components of content that you can drag and drop around a screen, make changes in real time, hit save, and it's sort of deployed to the web. Pretty neat stuff. Gives a little bit more control and power back to a marketing person to use Salesforce Sites, not have to jump into a Visualforce page and edit some code.
Which I think will do a lot for Sites, because Sites has been great, and there's 17,000 sites on there, but as someone who's built more than one site, it is not meant for the weak of heart.
Probably the hottest feature is being able to build your site in locally on your machine, whether you build it, HTML, or you use Dreamweaver or something like that. You have your local folder that has all your assets for your website. You drag it right into the browser, and all those assets go right into Sites as little components and widgets, and your content goes up, and it essentially rebuilds the site into Sites technology in no time. Pretty neat stuff.
Very cool. I'll throw out the one thing I'd like to see bought and brought up at Dreamforce next year. It's something that I've kind of talked about, maybe not in the podcast, but certainly in my own personal circles, if anybody's willing to listen, is that while content and documents and now files, which is a combination of content, is great, please, Mark, go buy a company like Jungle Disk, like Box.net, like somebody else who has figured out folder access on the desktop and figured it out well. Because while everything's still in the cloud, if I can't get to that folder easily, quickly on my desktop, pop it open, save it as a PDF, or move on, it's still not going to be as useful. And we use Jungle Disk as our we call it a cloud LAN, our clan. And it's great because it's just a folder, and I click on it, but it's all existing in the cloud, and you can do all that syncing stuff. Please go buy something and then sync down that content to folders. Go buy Box.net. Thanks. All right, so my CloudFocus app pick of the week, I've actually picked this before, but I'm going to pick their sort of enhancements because I had a chance to go meet some of the guys, and that's my favorite part of Dreamforce was just meeting people and vendors, and especially a lot of Salesforce people. We know a lot of Salesforce people. We've worked with them in a lot of different areas, in a lot of different ways. It's great to catch up with them. But one was, a company named App Extremes. They make a lot of products. One's called Content Composer. And what it does is the ability to put a button in your org that you can click on. It can then use a template, whether that be an Excel or Word document template, merge the data, and then export it as a PDF or the original file, have workflow built around it. All sorts of very cool stuff that basically what the quotes PDF renderer can do, but that on steroids. So a couple new things they've added, which I'm excited to see. One is they now can support PowerPoint, so you can build from an opportunity or from something to a PowerPoint deck. That's great. I can't tell you the amount of times we had clients who wanted to do that, and we said, well, I can't do that. They can do multiple documents. So now you could have like your statement of work, your NDA, and your your contract all off your opportunity. One click button, select all three. It would merge all the fields, wrap it as a PDF, send it out to whoever your client or the person needs to sign off on it. But you can pick them. So you can pick them in line. Which one do you want to use? I can say, just use the statements, just use the statement of work, just use this, and put them together, and then merge all the documents together. That's awesome. And then the one thing that we just did, I want to throw a little bit of a shout out for EchoSign. You can actually merge the Content Composer, build the document, then throw it into EchoSign, which can then send it out for electronic signature. That is just unbelievably cool, and sort of where I think the future of e-signature, something we've talked about forever, is finally getting there. More and more clients are asking about it, and it's really doable, and not in a difficult way, but in a very easy built-in way. So that's my repick, I guess, my Dreamforce repick. All right, so if you want to follow us, remember, always the podcast and blog posts, weekly blog posts, are on blog.arkusinc.com. You can subscribe by RSS. Want to follow the company on Twitter? It's twitter.com/ArkusInc. That's ARKUSINC. I'm twitter.com/Jason M. Atwood. Justin here is Just Edelstein. And we're on Facebook. So facebook.com. I've heard of this thing called Facebook. Apparently they're a big deal, but we're there. And that's facebook.com/ArkusInc. Best way to keep up with the podcast, though, is always to go to iTunes, type in CloudFocus Weekly, hit subscribe, and whenever we publish the podcast, and we switch it up every day, sometimes we do 2 a week, sometimes we do 1, sometimes we do a Thursday, it'll come streaming down to you. Go down and you can sync it with whatever device you have in your arsenal of listening devices. And while you're there, we'd love a review. We actually have 5 reviews now. Wow. Shout out to the people who've added new reviews. Thank you.
5, really?
5, really?
I haven't even looked.
Well, there are 5 now. So thank you very much.
Thank you
for putting reviews. We love it. More is better. So leave a review, 5-star and above, as always. And until next week, thanks for joining CloudFocus Weekly, and we'll see you in the clouds.